Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of spatial expansion everywhere. Today, the drop-off fairy has blessed us with, well, a cornucopia of things, one of which I'm going to talk about now. So, once in a generation, probably more than once, but in every field, you find a genius, a guy that rises above everything and puts his stamp on a particular way of seeing the universe, or a industry, or a technology, or a set of technologies. Today we're going to talk about a guy named Jim Fozgate, who sadly just passed this last year, 23 I think. Jim was the sort of science-based pillar of the Rockford Fosgate company, who in my youth was known for loud, just loud, really dominant for quite some time in the audio industry as far as like car audio, especially show car audio. They had the Kicker series that was just, I mean, we're talking about kilowatts of power in your car, just thousands of watts just coming out of your Honda Civic for no discernible logical reason. And, you know, like bass so big that your car would jump and it didn't have hydraulics in it. It was just sad. I saw guys crack their own windows with just the sound out of a Kicker system once. And they would come up with all kinds of things, square drivers, just different materials. They were going for, they would throw it against the wall and see what stuck, and everything that stuck they made. So you could tell that this was kind of Jim's passion. This is just what it was. In that same era, when we're talking about the late 80s, early 90s, late 80s especially, actually probably far back as the 70s, the evolutions that were happening, you were seeing a lot of more home theater, more of those kinds of ideas evolve. You were seeing the advent of the CD, the compact disc player, and all of those technologies you were getting higher bit rates. Obviously, as you got the CD, you got a higher bit rate. Everybody has this confusion that they think that vinyl has a higher bit rate than CDs, and I'm like, how exactly? Because they just don't understand how things work. So that, there's this hipster, I have to have everything on vinyl, which can be scratched, sort of, as opposed to digital, which is, I don't know. But, spend enough time as a DJ and you realize that there's, that you're just, it's a prop at that point. It's just for people to see it. And it's not better, it's not worse, it just is. So, and especially now that you have the levels of bit rate that we have, it's just so far beyond what we could do with a disc at the back in the day is just irrelevant. So he was making a sort of a fix for home theaters, and the home theater problem was either A, we were leaving the era of quadrophonic sound. That was a big thing. So there is a concept in speaker technology that you would call a phantom center channel. This is if you had two channel, so you think of your typical DJ setup where you have a DJ in the middle and two towers of things next to him. And your goal in setting up like that, well, first of all, don't set up like that unless you have to, because you're just doing it for looks. It's not the best way to sound. Put speakers in more places, because otherwise you have a really loud hot spot here, and then everywhere else in the room gets less music, and then you have to have everyone here going, you what? I can, yeah, the purple penguin, what? Or you could actually have everyone be able to hear the music and each other. But this is not. It doesn't give you that some people desperately need. But actually, I'm just saying, if you have to do that, also put speakers in the back, because then everyone can have that, if that's the show you're running. So, which wolf are you going to feed? At the end of the day, these were adjustments for lacking center channels. We didn't have, I know you Gen Z kids, you don't understand that soundbars didn't exist that long ago, not that long ago in history. And they still suck. They really do. Get decent two-channel speakers is better than the soundbar. I promise you, my friend. I promise you. So this phantom center, or this idea that you could hear this, triangulate sound, because you have two ears, and that's the way we're supposed to do things. And by playing with the ability with the balance of, which is pan to the left and which is pan to the right sounds, you can locate things in space or echolocate them, even if they're not actually there. Just by, if I'm running a band, I can run the toms on a big drum kit to go doo 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 doo, and every time he plays, it'll sound like that. Just how much I've panned them left and right. And it'll seem like that's what's happening to your brain, regardless of if you can see it or not. So there is some play there with the way that we echolocate, and that's what Jim was playing with the device that I'm about to present now, which is heavier than I thought it would be, by the way. This is a chunky boy. You don't want to drop this on your foot. I'm just saying. Not that you would anyway. I don't know why anyone would hacky sack one of these things. This is the Black Ice, formerly Jolida Audio, just in case there's no confusion. FOZ SXX, which stands for Soundstage Expander. What is Soundstage? Soundstage is the perceived width of the noise that is coming at your face. And we do this very easily. If you have, it's a self-defense mechanism, first and foremost. If you have one horse riding at you, you will be able to identify that. If you have an army marching at you, you need to be able to identify that. Is this a herd of buffalo that I'm trying to hunt, or is this one lone deer? Is this a pack of coyotes or wolves? So you don't think about the evolutionary necessity of soundstage recognition in your brain, I think. How often in your day are you thinking about this? Honestly, less than the Roman Empire, I promise you, my friend. So the point here is that as a person who is trying to get the most out of the enjoyment of sound, now that becomes almost inverted. You need to think about certain things a lot. You need to think about dynamics, how much sound pressure is actually coming at you and how quickly. So that's the power, the whipping power of like a drum hit or a bass drum kick. Does it fool you into feeling that in your chest if it's coming through headphones? Now I've said the magic word, which is headphones. This is designed for speakers and like small apartments. However, a couple of people have experimented with using this in headphones. The biggest disadvantage of headphones, there's the old joke that the best headphones are speakers. The problem is that everyone can't be using speakers all the time. If you live in a small community, small apartment, thin walls, you still live with your parents live with you, because that inverts. If you have small children, if you have a work situation where your work environment is noisier than you can focus, but I know a lot of people who have full audiophile, I'm talking about 5-figure audiophile setups in their work, because they cannot be distracted by all of the papers and all the background bullshit. So they put on, something very meditative. Think like the Necks. Have you ever heard of the Necks? Not NEX, but their music is very almost tantric. It's very slow. It's very paced, and it'll keep you. It won't distract you. You won't be like, "Hey, I'm singing along, Britney Spears." It's very almost like a Gregorian chant, but just with instruments. A huge bass piano, and a very simple three piece. These guys are monsters. I don't know if you would call them jazz, but they kind of are, but they're not. It's very they're beyond whatever even jazz is, but not in that avant-garde, I'm going to play all the damn notes way. They're going to play it like less notes. It's like the opposite of that. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know what it's like the basement. You know what I mean? It's like the after party where, you've been up for 3 days and this is you're just grooving, but you ain't asleep yet. So this is designed to fix spatial relations problems, whether they be in your tiny apartment where you want the soundstage to appear to your brain to be beyond the walls of your place. Now, initially, what you would do is you try to find the best speakers that you have, the best amp that you have, and most of your amp is going to be most of your soundstage is going to be in your amp. Without an amp with a wide soundstage, you're kind of, you can't make it bigger, to a certain extent beyond that. So what you would do is you get the best amp you could find, then you get the best speakers you find, and you would do what we call towing them in or out until you found the soundstage to be the most pleasant for you. Now, some people love this closed back headphone kind of or IEMs. They love the super. I'm in my own headspace. You call it claustrophobic if you want, but I feel like it has a negative connotation when you actually like it. So I wouldn't call it that. Intimate, let's call it that. Almost I'm snuggled up in my blanket kind of a approach to. I want the sound to hug me and compress me. And for those people, they buy, like LCD2s or something like that. There's something really, really compact. And then you have the people who want to buy like Sennheiser HD 800Ss, which is just like this. It's just like behind, it's just like this huge cul-de-sac of sound, which is usually, the problem is it's usually encompassed with a lack of low end, a lack of bass, and a lack of impact. So you get this kind of airy-fairy, there's a lot of Asian music that's designed this way. It has like very little low end grunt, no torque and no kick and no, you know what I mean? None of that funky stuff. So you end up with a lot of IEMs, especially designed on this sort of high. I'm looking for the 16 kilohertz air. This is what they call it. Top end, very plinky AMSR bullshit that no one can. It's just this. It's almost like hearing static. Almost. It's this. There's a lot of people whose nervous systems kind of bait for that. They just love that sort of thing. For me, it drives me nuts. Honestly, I'd rather not. I'd rather everything have note weight. I want everything to sound as if I put it in my earphones, in my system, in my IEMs. I want it to sound like there's an acoustic guitar in the room and I just did this. I don't need to be able to play it. I want it to sound like I flicked it. The same, I want all of that information. And the problem with playing too much for Soundstage and too much for anything is that you're going to draw away from that. So that's the magic game, is to get it to sound real in the room to you. And so it may take a little bit of complexity to sort of patch on the parts that you lose typically by either using too close of a field of listening, too small of a driver, not enough actual just amps, not enough volts, not enough watts, in the combination, but having volt heavy watts versus amp heavy watts, all of those things will change all of these. So the solution for me is to try to find things that, let's begin at the beginning, is to start with something that has dynamics, impact, shrug, grunt. It pushes. There's that connection to the earth. So you have to have the gap band. You have to have the low end bass, the kick drum. If that disappears, one of my biggest pet peeves is dealing with people who say, I want to listen to jazz music, so I don't need a low end. I'm like, but most of those recordings, the classic ones, are from before the 60s. They didn't have a bunch of channels, and they didn't put a mic in the kick drum, or sometimes not in front of the bass. So you're lacking low-end information, and then you're going to tell me that you're going to go listen to them with a pair of headphones that has no low-end information, on an amp that has no low-end information. And so basically, it's like a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox. It's so faded, the low-end information is gone. And you forget that if you have something that actually brings that back. See, the problem is they compare, in some people's heads, in a lot of people's heads in this community, they confuse classical music and jazz, and especially old jazz music, together. And having been a player of both of these types of music, there's no way. The techniques used for picking these things up, a classical orchestra, the room that you're in, as opposed to a jazz club, the amount of mics that we have, the amount of concentrate. You know how well mic'd the timpani is as to a modern jazz kit? It's vastly different, trust me when I say this. The concentration on just making that one sound heard. And if you hear things that have a lot of percussion and stuff and I'm talking about classical music, just big bombastic pieces, I don't need to run through the list. If you know them, you know, and if you don't, I'm not going to be saying anything but gibberish. But when you hear boom, you know what I mean, in an orchestra, it's there. There's 130, dynamic range is it's there. You know what I'm saying? And so this idea that you're going to compare that with something, with a recording that was picked up with a single mic in an entire room is daft to me, especially low end. Our ears are not designed to hear low end as well as we are to hear the stuff around 5K, you know what I mean, and higher. We're just not. 1K even and higher, and below that is a huge jump. We need to amplify the low end. That's why Beats headphones are so popular. They don't do it well, but they have the right idea. And even doing the right idea badly comes back to them making a ton of money because everybody's like, oh, there is stuff down here that I haven't been hearing. Even if you listen to that EQ on, let's say, inferior technology as far as the actual drivers and all of that stuff. The EQ itself, if you put it on a much bigger driver, or a much better driver technically, then with a lot of technicality, you're going to hear a huge difference between just it being flat and everybody chasing what they think of as flat, which actually isn't flat. And, real flat actually looks like this because you lose your ability to hear the bass. And this being the bass, actually, I'm reversed now, so it would be over here for you. So the bass region, as you're going towards the higher stuff, you should actually, it's something like this. And we're only recently becoming aware of that and starting to measure on this sort of slope, because we've always been like, well, it should just be flat all the way through and that'll be perfect. And that's why stuff sounds weird, because we have the Harmon curve and all of these things. And now we're starting to back off of those and get a higher level of awareness of what can be measured and how the human ear actually reacts. And then there's a lot of stuff going on with your pinna and your HRTF, which is your torso. Your torso shape matters to how you hear things, and people aren't aware of that, even in headphones. So, I mean, there's, obviously as you go to IEMs, that reduces because it's already forced all the way into your ear, some sort of medical examination. But all of that to say, this is the cure for losing your ability to hear where things are in space and having a realistic response or a simulacrum of what was intended by the artist in the first place. The goal initially is to get what was played at the club, what was played on the album, into your face in as at least a realistic manner as is humanly possible. And I think that this is a device that will help us do that. As it seems to have been very cleanly packed, by the way. I almost don't want to unwrap it. It's like very nicely done. Almost. No, don't fool yourself. I do want it to be unwrapped. Oh, okay. So, we have a nice, clean caramel box. We like that. Giggity. We have... Oof, this thing is heavy. It's like a metal kettlebell going on right here. And then we has a tube. It's a very interesting tube. It's very small. Look at that. So tiny, so tubey. You're tiny, we're tubey. We're all a little looby. I'm not going to finish that. You know how we do. Okay, so this is, by the way, I am no longer in North America. I'm in Serbia, and therefore, we had to order the Euro version of the Vision, which you can see here has the 220 to 240 volt access. Do not get that confused, because you will end up in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong thing. So, let's do the unit tour, and we'll start at the back since I've already shown you the back. Back it up. Okay, a little dust going on here, but that's fine. I always blame customs. They did some. We have inputs, left and rights. We seem to have 3 of them. On the front of these 3, there seems to be a matching toggle for the... That's very satisfying click there. And we have, obviously, the hole for the power. The power. More power, baby. And we have the outputs, left and right. We only have a single output. So this is designed to be inline, in a chain, and with only RCA. I tried to convince them to make an XLR version. He said this would be really, really hard to do with this chassis, and now I see why. So I did not get my wish, but I will not cry about it. It is designed to take a 12AU7 tube. I will now show you the top. This is the tube hole. It's where the tubes goes in. It's very fancy. It's got holes and tubes. Well, no, it's just got holes right now. I'll put the tubes later. This is the indicator of, how do I explain this in a short period? This is designed to tell you where the signal is in the chain, in the recording. So is it on the left? Is it on the right? What's going on here? Is it in or out of phase? That's kind of the goal of this here. So you can you have a visual way to set your dial to get the best experience or out of the song. Best thing I can say in the fastest, because you got phase, and it's just going to tell you if you're hearing a track in the right ear, those kinds of things. And so the goal here, to some extent, is to get some of what you're hearing in your left ear into your right ear. When you don't have that, you don't have echolocation. Or triangulation is another, audio triangulation is what you're looking for. That is how we find where a thing is. You take, I think, basic trigonometry. You take a point here, then you take how long the sound took to get to you, and then you can figure out how far away it is and what its location is. If you can have data on both of those 2 points, you can find any third thing. Like, this is how they find, gunshots and all these kind of things. They'll take 2 recordings and then figure out how long it took for the bullet to hit, how long it took for the report to, blah, I don't care. But you get the idea. If you can have 2 places, you can find the third place, and that makes a triangle, hence triangulation. So here, what you're trying to do is triangulate all the notes and all the sounds and all the little bells and whistles and basses and whatever. And triangulation is easier to do as sounds go up because of the size of our eardrums. If we had bigger eardrums like elephants, it would be easier to triangulate lower sounds, but most triangulation happens above, I think, 1,000 hertz. The vast majority of it. It's not impossible to do, but it takes a ton more volume at a lower sound to do it. So that's we're back to the problem of making a sound system and reproducing sounds. This is why people have massive subwoofers and a tiny little tweeter in any sort of sound setup. So now we have this thing that we're calling bass EQ, and it just says minimum and max. This is a 20 hertz, 9 decibel knob. So all the way this way, 9 decibels, all the way this way, 0 at 20 hertz. So you're asking for a 20 hertz rise or slant in that direction. This is the dimensions, or this way is narrow. I had to look and tell which way. This way is narrow, because I'm dyslexic, and this way is wide. And so what you're asking for is, do my speakers do this, or do they do this? Am I towing them straight at me, or am I towing them out? That's really all you're asking of that knob. And now you're having, this is just the inputs, which I clicked before. It's a very satisfying click. I like it. And then, this is display on, display off, and the power. So that's it. That's all you got. It seems super simplistic, but the thing that it does is all it's designed to do. And because of that, it is quite a powerful addition to things. There are only a couple of things that do this. I also have a preamp / headphone amp that does this exact same thing as well. So the idea is to combine this with that and get a complete control of my soundstage, and to be able to make even things that were supposed to be tight wide as hell, or things that were supposed to be super wide that I don't like tight, by just reaching over and going, Torin Tokyo, come in Tokyo. If you know, you know. My guy, Ryan, sent, in addition to the tube here, this tube, and it says tubes, from this company, shit, who has the best, these are some pretty shitty tubes. That's all I'm going to say. Best name ever. Got to give it up to Jason. And let's see what's in here. We have Uno tubes. And this particular tube is a Tungsol 6SN7 GTB made in Russia. And the number is 19_09. We like it in Russia. I'm hoping this will fit. I assume Ryan tried it, but it looks way bigger than the other thing. Yeah, I think Ryan might have sent me the wrong tube. I'm not sure how this is going to work, but we'll see. I'm going to have to get an adapter or something. I mean, they're only a couple of bucks on Alibaba, but... So we're going to have to go with the original tube. There will be no tube rolling today. Wasn't prepared for that. Beauty of an unboxing, it just happens. Oh yeah, wow, this is a much different animal completely, if you can tell. It's much smaller. The pins themselves are much smaller. We're looking at an incident needle versus a horse needle over here. That's kind of crazy. I don't know if that's focusing in, but there is a very, very big difference. And I'm not aware if this would work without the tube. I'm guessing no, but again, I would be guessing. Come on. Okay, this is your first time around here. Giant hands are not good for all things. Just put it that way.
2 hours later.
Tubes always give you a heart attack because you have to be very firm and authoritative with shoving them into things, but they're made of glass and they're small, so you're like, I don't want to end up with fingers full of glass when I force this thing in there. And I've never, in the tire of my decades of pushing them in and out, had anything. There's always that moment where like, is this gonna? Okay, yeah, okay, it's cool, we're cool. Okay, so we now have inserted the tubes into the thing. You've seen me push the thing down successfully. Okay, now we are going to probably take a little pause for the cause because I don't think you need to see me put a RCA thing into another RCA. That would just be boring as hell and have no point visually. So, TV magic. Managed to grab these nice, really thick, chonky boy cables from the Fatherland. Yeah. 1 meter RCA cinch cables, triple shielded and stereo from Ground Zero. Ground Zero, German engineering. But I mean, they got the nice right angles on them. You can see that they're quality. They're very thick. The gauge on these things, they don't say it, but Jesus, it looks pretty big. I'll look up what it is later, but it's like speaker level gauge. Oh, maybe it's right on here. It just says Ground Zero high performance RCA cable. So your guess is as good as mine, but it's pretty chunky. It's not zero, so, but it's also not 25 or something. Some slimmy gaff there. Okay, so now we have the Foz inserted by RCAs into the chain of that's coming into the preamp. So if I'm coming out of the preamp into the preamp from the DAC, into the preamp from the DAC, that's what's happening. So now we have it in chain, and we have the ability to jump in and out of whether we're using it or not into the accurate HPA 281. Which has become the DAC of choice because it was the biggest one, or amp of choice because it's the biggest one, and I didn't feel like moving it. So sue me. I guess that's what you can do if you so choose to become litigious about such a things. I don't know what you're going to get out of it, but hey, we'll see. You won't get this. I'll eat this before you get it. Well, it might come back someday, but it won't be in a condition that you want. Trust me when I say. The goal here, so I don't know if I've been very clear, if I said it, at noon, you're getting nothing. You're getting a 9 dB swing, so you're going to get negative 9 dB out of the bass if you pull it towards me. If I push it away from me, or ostensibly to the right, if you're facing it, you're going to get a 9 dB bump. So having it at noon or midnight, depending on how you look at things, is going to give you zilch, zip, zero, nada. So what I'm going to do is pull it toward myself, push it away from myself. You have two different options. The bass knob, the 20 hertz bump, is more subtle than you would think because it's so far away from that, like I said, that it's so far away from that 100 hertz area where you're going to really hear the boom, boom, boom. So you're going to hear the tone of almost all of the things picking up. You're going to hear all the undertone series. So the instruments themselves will thicken up and they'll feel more present and more aware and more, people will say warm, but I don't feel like it's a warmth that it's really adding, but it's something. There's definitely a note strength, like a temerity to like a gravitas to everything that's happening, whether it's in a full orchestra or just an acoustic guitar. So there's definitely a thing there. And then on the other side, we're going to swing, tighten up the soundstage as much as I can and open it up and see what I like. So there's I got some interesting things here. I've got a couple of classical pieces, some old blues, some Metallica. So there's a lot going on, and I'm going to see what what really has bigger effects, and maybe I'll put a couple other things in there when I'm realizing I'm not getting the real. I realize that I'm going to try to find something that doesn't have Soundstage already at all, and then see what happens there. Maybe some really processed rap or something like that. So right now I'm going to use the Bach Toccata and Fugue in D minor with organ and drum set because I like this track and it's monstro. And I'm going to, let's just give it a shot with the Soundstage at neutral, and then I will play with the dials. Okay, that was normal. Now I'm just going to crank that beast up. Okay, one of the reasons I chose a instrument the size of a building is because the range here is from 2 hertz to 200 hertz. I didn't stutter. And moving that much air is remarkable in and of itself. What I'm starting to notice is that the sections that are more busy, the effect is more subtle. And what's funny about this is that this is two things in the fact that it's also a soundstage reducer. And some people may like that better. And there are certain sounds and instruments where I'm like, maybe I want less soundstage on this. Maybe there will be different ensembles or recordings that I'll like less on this, because it seems to tighten up the note weight in the timbre a little bit, and sort of expels that air. And not everybody likes that. Who am I to tell you what to enjoy about this? So it does have two uses, even though it only has really one thing. But they're quite different, and one may work for you for metal and one may not work for you for classical or whatever. I find that the bigger the amount of air, let me test that. I think the bigger the amount of what's going on, the busier the track, the less of a real grand effect it might have. So I'm going to go to full orchestra here. And, we're talking about Rachmaninoff Symphony 1 in D minor, opus number 13. We'll see what we can see here. It does seem a little more AM radio with both knobs rolled back and off. It also does seem to have a very distinct zoom effect. Almost like I'm walking into or past the orchestra as I pull the soundstage back. So it almost comes like right to my ear level or even behind my ear slightly. And then it gets sort of pushed away, and sort of it's not just... It also has a secondary axis, sort of, but not really. It's hard to explain because it's not just getting wider; it's getting further away as it gets wider. And maybe that's the way that it does the thing that it does. And maybe that's just me being an autistic person, because my hearing is very different than most people's. So, but also and usually very accurate. So I'm not afraid of that. Big swells, lots of stuff. Means something a little more violent here. Actually, let's go to something smoother.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Carmen Cavallaro, and
nobody cares, Carmen. Ooh. Sarah Vaughan, After Hours at the London House. After Hours at the London House. I can say it. Okay, it's magnificent on this recording. This thing does what it's supposed to do. And it's not a hammer. It's a surgical instrument. It's very subtle. And on this Sarah Vaughan track, it's killing the game. It is definitely easing into a different position. I mean, I'd love to get some different 12A7s and 12U7s and roll this thing a bit. But thankfully, those are the tubes that guitarists use, so they should be relatively easy to find at music stores. Yeah, it definitely becomes more stereo. And this recording is very distinctly panned hard left and hard right, so it's very easy to see what's happening. And again, that feeling of pulling in and in space and pushing out pulling in and pushing out in space is distinct here. But I can barely hear the kick drum when the bass notes are pulled back, if anybody's making a sound when she's singing. I can hear it a bit more when she's not singing. But the audience clapping, the silverware, background noise, all here. But the bass almost sounds like a baritone. It's so weak when the bass is 9 dB down. Above neutral, it's, I'd say at about 4 or 5 even, it becomes much more of a prominent feature. And the actual timekeeper in the band, it's super panned though, like it's right in my right ear. It's like a little bit more crossfeed and this would be nice, but I bought other things for that because I did. So After Hours at the London House, great recording, by the way. Sarah Vaughan, an amazing pioneering singer that most people don't know about these days. And she had her own style that was somewhere, that whole era, everybody thinks Ella Fitzgerald was the only person in that era that sang like that. But she was a little more subdued and a little less power, a little more smooth than Ella. And I appreciate that, honestly. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Ella, but, there's degrees to it. And sometimes you use a scalpel and not a sword, not an axe. Supertramp, Crime of the century. If you don't know Supertramp, look them up. Do yourself a favor. Some of the best use of keys in modern music. And the engineering on this album is just class A. Shaolin Afronauts, Journey Through Time. Very sort of Fela Kuti cover band, I guess, sort of. If you know what I'm trying to say, if there is such a thing. Very Afro-pop jam band. Okay, we kind of get the idea. Basically, you're pushing out the soundstage. As you push out the soundstage, you really do need to compensate with some of the low end. It is a subtle tool. It is not something that everybody needs. It's not something anybody needs. But if you're looking for that last 5% out of your sound system, and I am tempted to set this up with speakers now and see what the big hubbub about as it's designed. I may or may not do that. Who knows? It's definitely doing its thing, whatever that its thing is. Not whatever I've described it, but there's a lot of control here. This is not something that's gonna, if you're a hype demon, if you're looking for some big, overpowering, super giant changes, this isn't what you're looking for. This is the last little bit of cumin in the dish. It's not even a garnish. It's definitely changing the flavor. So if you are interested in such things, you will definitely want to go out there and use this to listen to everybody's art.